A little bold and extremely fun, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on KCMX AM 880. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes. Here's Craig.
How sweet it is to be loved by you. How sweet it is to be loved by you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. 19 minutes after the hour. Real treat this morning for any of you who've tuned in. All you real patriots, all you real Americans, when you want to hear about the Constitution, United States Constitution, and how it affects us and what we do in our everyday lives, the one person you can surely count on and look to is Joel Marks. He's a local, of course, he studied the U.S. Constitution for the last 40 years. He's even studied the first 7 presidents. He's a board member, Rogue Valley Transportation District, and teaches classes at Southern Oregon University. And Joel, thanks so much for being on the program this morning.
Well, thank you, Craig.
It's great. So the Constitution, you made an amazing comment to me the other day, and you said there was a time that we as a federal government, we as an American government, broke away from the Constitution and basically have lost our way, and there was a time in history that happened. Tell us what that is.
Yes, that's a very important piece for a lot of people that are very interested in the history of the United States. At the turn of the 19th century, we had a big reform movement, and Theodore Roosevelt was leading that reform movement. Now, he was a Republican, and Theodore Roosevelt, at the time, the Congress was Republican too, and he was something very different. The American people had never seen anything like this.
Right.
He had tremendous energy. They'd just come out of the Spanish-American War. He had climbed San Juan, that small hill. It only took an hour, and the American people were just delighted about Theodore Roosevelt. But Theodore Roosevelt felt that the Constitution was very different than other presidents and Congresses had thought about it. He felt that if the Constitution did not specifically prohibit something, he could do it. That's exactly opposite of what the founding of this country represented. The founding represented, and the founding fathers actually represented the fact that if it was not enumerated, then you could not do it. You only could do it if it was enumerated in the Constitution. Otherwise, you couldn't do it. So Theodore Roosevelt put the Constitution on its head. And since that time, we had Taft after Roosevelt, and Taft was more of a constitutional authority, and he actually was the only president we've ever had that served on he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court starting in 1921 and was President of the United States from 1908 to 1912. So he was the only president that did that. But after that, we got Woodrow Wilson, who completely changed the domestic and international relations of the United States of America from what it originally was. And you can trace actually Roosevelt and Wilson to our international situation today, how we've intervened so much in so many places that even the American people now are saying, well, how can we be doing this? Why are we here? What are we doing over here? Why have we intervened over here? You can trace it back to those presidencies. And from that point on, from actually Wilson on, we have never become what George Washington once said, do not entangle yourself, have entangling alliances with others. And he set the tone because he didn't get involved in the British and French wars that were taking place.
Exactly. So when Theodore Roosevelt kind of set the stage for that, if it's not written down, I can squeeze in there and do that. And then Wilson came along. What did Wilson exactly do that?
Well, Wilson, in 1913, Wilson got elected he ran in 1912, got elected. In 1913, he took office. And 1913 had 3 things that happened, Craig, that completely changed America. And the 3 things that happened were, number one, we had the 16th Amendment, which is the income tax. And what they did with the 16th Amendment is they did not apportion. The founders wanted taxes to be apportioned equally. They would, if you had 10,000 people and you needed $10,000 from that particular state, each person would pay $1. So we have the income tax, which is the 16th Amendment, which has become a monstrosity. It's Frankenstein. Nobody knows what's in it, and nobody can follow it. And then you have the 17th Amendment, which hurt states' rights because the 17th Amendment is the popular election of senators. They used to be appointed when Douglas and Lincoln had their debates. That it wasn't for who would get the most votes. It was for who could influence the legislature to then appoint them. And that was a good way because you'd have states' rights, and if somebody came in and said, well, you have a senator said, we want a sewerage plant over here in Ashland or in the state of Oregon, let's say. The state legislature said, we don't want that sewerage plant. That's not up to you, that's up to us. And if you keep doing that, we're not going to appoint you again. They protected states' rights. And then the other thing that happened in 1913, which was very, very bad, because Andrew Jackson set the tone to destroy what he called the monster bank. Well, we had the Federal Reserve in 1913, and the true story of the Federal Reserve, how that all got formed, it happened in 1910, behind closed doors at a little place off of the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island, and some 7 people got together and formed this bank, which has been a very, very bad thing for the American people, particularly the laborers and the farmers and the small businessmen and the middle class. It has become an international bank. It's not just a bank for the United States. It's an international bank, and it's turned out that Andrew Jackson was correct.
Yeah, interesting. And you brought up 2 points. One, of course, in the Section 3 of the Constitution, it says the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state chosen by the legislature thereof. And, of course, for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. And, of course, it's been changed by the 17th Amendment. So that's what happened there. And then what's interesting even to me...
And that really hurts, Craig. That for your listeners, they need to understand that... when it was changed in 1913, there was a populist movement at that time, so they thought, well, everybody could vote on everybody. We've never believed in one person, one vote. Never believed in that doctrine, because if you're a senator from California, you represent 30 million people.
Right.
If you're a senator from Wyoming, you represent 300,000 people. So we don't believe in one vote, one person. That's a misnomer. But this, on the 17th Amendment, hurt states' rights, and you got more power towards the federal government when they broke the bonds that they severed the bonds of states' rights when they did that.
Yeah, because the state had, if they appointed the senators, they would appoint senators that would be in the best interest of the state.
That's right. That's
Yes.
exactly right.
Instead of the federal government and the senators and then the lobbying and the elections throughout the country, just exactly what's happening right now in the state of Oregon as Senator Jeff Merkley is up for re-election and he's being challenged. Now you've got this national lobbying, so you can only imagine the amount of money that's coming from the establishment to...
Well, that's a very good point, Craig, because if Merkley and Webby were appointed by the state legislature, you wouldn't have the tremendous money that's being poured out through all these lobbying groups from K Street and all of this special interest money that would pour in to these people, because it would be the state legislature that determines. And these people aren't going to go to 50 state legislatures and try to fund all these state legislators to appoint somebody. The founders were very bright. They broke power out. They broke it up. Nobody had all the power. Now, in 2014, everybody looks to the federal government. They want a grant for this, a grant for that. They want money for businesses. They want ethanol subsidies. They want steel tariffs. All kinds of things are happening, and it's all at the federal level.
It's amazing. Joel, we've got a break coming up, but ladies and gentlemen, we've got Joel Marks on the phone. He's an expert related to the United States Constitution. He's actually studied intensely the first 7 presidents of the United States. And, Joel, when we come back, I want to talk about what has happened just recently. And, I mean, this swap, and the fact that the Senate and the House of Representatives are so irate with the president, the fact that they made a bill and he signed it related to giving 30 days prior to making any swaps, and he just did whatever he wanted to do. Once again, kind of just, embarrassed them publicly because whatever law or bill they put forth, he just overrides. I want to hear about that, but I have just enough time to we'll talk about this as well. This Amendment 10 in the Constitution, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. I want to talk about that when we come back, because that would have challenged Teddy Roosevelt, right?
Yes, it did.
So
he reversed.
All right. All right, we'll be right back. We're just getting going. Hope you can hang out with us on the Sunrise Show. Back after this.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX Newstalk 880. We want to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or go to KCMXAM.com and go to the Talk to Us tab. Send us your thoughts. Lively conversations around news, politics, and people, plus local news and weather every 30 minutes.
The alligator, jump back and jack. See you later, alligator. Come in, sister. Papa's in the girls' dance.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunrise Show right here on KCMX. 33 minutes after the hour, little Otis Redding bringing us back in. And we've got Joel Marks on the phone with us. He's an expert when it comes to U.S. Constitution. And Joel, it's just so amazing to me. I come back to this related to the oath of office. And it's in the Constitution, and it's such a honor and a privilege to be guiding and being elected in the United States of America. And they have this oath of office. I can't even believe that people would take this oath. I solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. These words are so emblazoned to us, and yet, like you just said, Joel, President Barack Obama does everything exactly opposite of the Constitution.
Well, let me mention something about that oath. All 3 branches of government take that oath.
Yes.
To protect and defend the Constitution. The judiciary, who takes that oath, has become, in the American culture, the final word, which never was intended to be. The judiciary has no authority. All they do is give an opinion. To execute is the executive branch, and the legislative branch is the one who makes the law. So, if the judiciary gives an opinion, and they can't enforce the opinion, there's no enforcement authority there. Only the executive can enforce. And the executive doesn't agree with the opinion, then he doesn't have to follow it. And that's happened in our history. 3 presidents have done that: Jefferson, Lincoln, and Jackson. And there's a whole story to the civil rights movement, which I blame on the Supreme Court of 1883. But that we can't get into that. That's the deepest thing right now. But let me tell you, switch courses, because the judicial is the weakest branch of government according to the 78 Federalist paper by Alexander Hamilton.
Right.
The judiciary is the weakest branch. It has become the final word because the American people have not been paying attention, and they've allowed that to happen. Actually, the most powerful branch is the legislature. That's the people's word, and that's where the people really make themselves known. As far as the president following the Constitution, he knows what's in the Constitution. Therefore, he has decided, with his ideological philosophy, to go against everything that it says because he doesn't agree with the Constitution. He doesn't agree with the Founding Fathers and their formula. He doesn't agree with limited government. And he doesn't agree with what they did in way back in the 18th century. 1787, of course, was the Federal Convention, and then it was ratified in 1788, 1789.
Right.
We finally had our government, but he doesn't agree with that. He thinks America is not has done a lot of bad things, and so he comes from a different perspective, kind of from a colonial perspective that. America is kind of a colonial nation, an imperialist nation, that kind of mantra that's out there. That's unfortunate because that's not Americana. That's not the American dream, and that's not what we're built on. And what we need to do, Craig, and you and I have discussed this, the American people in their righteous might have got to stand up to what's happening and restore that which was lost. Because right now, we're in the throes of the Constitution being shredded.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And here's the next thing. This is what's hopeful is because we have this document. I'm sitting here thinking about this as you're talking, Joel, and the United States Constitution. I mean, first off, you have to realize where the Americans came from and what they had been oppressed by, and that was the British government and the tyranny that they had been beaten down, and they never again did they want that to occur. Never again did they want their women and children raped and killed and plundered and everything else.
This is an amazing point that you're making, because if anybody takes the time to read Article 2 of the Constitution, that's the executive branch, and it's very small. It's very, very small, and it's intended that way from just what you're saying. They had King George III, and they were breaking away, and they were, as a matter of fact, it took them 60 ballots to decide on the executive branch what it was going to look like. They couldn't figure it out. They didn't even want a one executive. They wanted a kind of a committee, and that finally got voted down. And then they looked around the room at the Federal Convention in 1787. They looked at George Washington and said, well, that's going to be our president. None of us are going to be president. So let's fashion the executive branch around somebody with that high integrity. And that's what they did. And the second article of the Constitution is very, very small. The first article is the legislature. That's bigger. Second article is smaller. And the third article, which is the judiciary, is the smallest of all. The founders didn't think the judiciary was going to have much power at all. So you're exactly right. And what Theodore Roosevelt did was he expanded the second article. And he did it in a way, when he signed off on national parks, there is nothing in the Constitution about national parks. That's a state. That's the 10th Amendment.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
It's not enumerated in the Constitution, so you got to go to the 10th Amendment. If it doesn't say it,
right,
then you go to the 10th Amendment. And then the states, in our form of government, Craig, as you well know, the real power is the states. Not the federal government.
It's unbelievable when you think about that. And it all worked for the common good because, and that was the point I was making, is that because the tyranny that had been the British rule, they never wanted to go that place again, and so they worked so hard. And you would think that the politicians now would go and give them credence by saying they know firsthand, if we don't do what they suggest, we will end up in that tyrannical type government, lawlessness, and everything else.
Well, look at Eric Cantor. Look at this, what just happened. He was in leadership. I don't know if you heard his closing remarks, his press conference.
I did, yes.
He's out of touch. He's saying, he was saying that the government is there to help everybody. We don't want the government there to help everybody. I want the government out of the way so that the American people can be free to do what they decide to do. That's what everybody needs, to be free to decide what they want to do in life without interference from an all-powerful federal government. That's not the role of the role of the federal government is to protect your property rights. That's really what the role is. You're trying to protect everybody's property, and you're trying to have a civil government. You have to have a military. You have to have some government. so that you don't fall into anarchy or tyranny. That's what the world experience has been. Anarchy or tyranny. It's going back and forth like a pendulum. The Founding Fathers got us right in the middle of that, which was called the golden mean. They got that from Aristotle. It's the golden mean right in the middle, and they came as close as any civilization in the history of man to govern properly with a limited form of government.
Joel, that is absolutely spot on. The nugget that everyone that's hearing my voice, that's hearing your voice, that's exactly the nugget right there. And that's what's hopeful, is that what they worked on is the best that there's ever been within any sense of government in the world.
Right.
And we're hearing it.
And the people that are complaining, they complain about a lot of different things, this, that, the next thing. What are they comparing it to? You got to compare. You can't, apples to apples, apples to oranges. You got to compare. What civilization has done better than ours? What civilization, using free market principles of Adam Smith, that's what we used when he wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776. We used those free market principles. We got away from mercantilism, which the British were doing in most of Europe, and used those principles. Yeah, there were bumps in the road. Yes, people, not everybody's going to make it the same. But when you're left free, you get the Henry Fords of the world. You get the Carnegies, the steel. How do you think we got the skyscrapers? How did we get Chicago and Philadelphia? And all of these major cities that were being built because of steel. And the Bessemer, he got his steel from the Bessemer Iron Works.
Yeah, Bessemer, Alabama.
He developed it. And how do you think you got the oil production so that we could drive the cars? That's Rockefeller.
Yep.
Yeah, you might not like some of the things here and there, but I want to tell you something. You let that thing go, and it's amazing.
Well, and that's what great America, that's why the rest of the world, they want to come here. And oh my gosh, Joel, we have so much. The immigration, we could spend a whole other thing on that. I want to get to that. We won't get to it today. Well, you could talk a little bit about it, but that intense issue.
The Attorney General Holder needs to be impeached. He has broken the law by not following the law, and he's done it in a not only symbolic, but he's cherry-picked what they want to follow, what they don't. And this, with the immigration, all of these 50,000 people who have just come up with their children, which is a shame, coming into America illegally, and we're not doing anything about it. That's Congress's role to stop that.
Absolutely. And
Congress has to stop that, and they have to stop the executive from breaking the balance of power.
Well, and you just talked about the role of the federal government is to protect property rights. You think about all those states along the southern border. They are completely inept in what they've done. It is ridiculous.
Yes, that's why Arizona rose up a couple years ago to stop the illegal immigration in their state. It's really a federal responsibility, but the federal government wasn't doing it.
No.
And they got forced into a situation to try to do something.
And now, of course, this footage is, like you said, at this point, they've indicated that 48,000 children, unescorted children, are now coming. And it's not just from Mexico. Now what's happening is they're coming from South America, and they've been sold a ticket, if you would, by these brokers, these human brokers that are down south, and say, hey, I know how I can get you into America, just pay me. And they're making hand over foot. You can only imagine the amount of money that they're taking, and they're getting these children there, and they, of course, won't say a word about
they wouldn't be able to do that if we wouldn't. They wouldn't be able to do that if we would enforce the borders.
Exactly right. And the Border Patrol, God help them down there, what's going on. And the fact that the federal government is laying down on this, and it's been years. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Well, the American people are either going to change the situation, or something's going to happen, because this is America's being diluted, and it's a very, very sad situation. Our founding fathers would look at this, and they would be startled. They would be absolutely startled. And the philosophy that Barack Obama espouses, which is really Karl Marx doctrine
Yeah.
of dialectical materialism, which does not work, never has worked. The American founding fathers would think that Barack Obama, regardless of skin color, forget about skin color, his ideas would be considered crackpot. Nobody would listen to him. The ideas are absolutely antithetical to Americana.
I know it. I'm looking at some of these quotes. I've got this. It's of course, it's unbelievable. It says, in questions of power, this is from Thomas Jefferson, in questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution.
The chains of the Constitution, not the Constitution, Craig, the chains. And why he said that was he wanted to chain all of the elected officials and make sure everybody followed exactly what the Constitution says so that you couldn't get out of those chains and do whatever you wanted to do like Theodore Roosevelt did.
It's so...
And by the way, Theodore Roosevelt disliked Thomas Jefferson very much.
Interesting that actually you found that in the records that Thomas, that Theodore Roosevelt just didn't like what he was. Just interesting. Well, Joel, it's fantastic. It's fascinating, and it does give us as Americans hope to move forward because we've got to stay grounded. We, the people, and I was making fun of this, but with the Veterans Administration, between the two groups of veterans, 57,000 and 60 some odd thousand, that came over to over 100,000 that now the Department of Justice and the FBI are now investigating. And I'm thinking to myself, is that what it takes? It takes 100,000 Americans to make a grievance and get the attention of the media so that the president and the federal government will act? And it seems like it's so.
We need to restore that which was lost.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, on the whitehouse.gov site, you can go to the written, it's a grievance. Oh, what's the word? Anyway, you get a petition. Thank you. It's 100,000 signatures. Once it reaches, is it 100,000 or 25,000 that validates the petition? I was thinking it was 100,000, but anyway, that's another story. Joel, it's always fascinating to hear from you related to the Constitution. I want to continue that. I want to keep going on that, so we'll have to time it another day. But this is, Americans need to hear this. Americans need to have a dialogue. They need to realize that the Constitution is a living, breathing thing, and it will be our saving grace if we can get our leaders empowered. Because that's what I think next is with, in fact, it talks about, George Washington talks about the education of the people. He said, no, it was James Madison. He said, a well-instructed people alone can be permanently a free people. And George Washington talked about the primary object should be the education of our youth. And that is exactly what we're doing right now.
We need to determine the foundation of people's beliefs. And once we can get to why they believe the way they do and how did they get that information, then we can help them.
Exactly. Where the beliefs went off and where they got those beliefs, and then you balance it against what the documents that we have for America. It immediately. It's so amazing, Joel, is when you do that and you eliminate it. You illuminate it. Everything falls away. I mean, it doesn't work. You can see where it doesn't work. It's not spin either. It actually is right there in black and white. The facts are the facts.
That's right.
Wow. Joel, it's always great to have you on and talk to you about that. We're going to do it again. So have a great weekend and a great Father's Day and all those super things, and we'll talk to you.
You too, Craig. It was very enjoyable, and thank you very, very much. And I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Excellent. All right. We'll got to take a break. We'll be back. More on the Sunrise Show when we return. You've just been listening to Joel Marks, very well-read expert on the United States Constitution. We'll have him on again. This is what it takes, ladies and gentlemen. When you have a soldier, anyone in political office, they have an oath. They swear an oath to protect, preserve the Constitution of the United States. We'll do more right after the break.
Stay tuned. Sunrise will return in a moment on KCMX Newstalk 880.